In the heart of modern psychology lies a secret, a book bound in red leather, filled with terrifying visions and divine conversations that its author, the brilliant psychoanalyst Carl Jung, kept hidden from the world for his entire life. He called it his most difficult experiment, a journey into his own soul that he feared might be a descent into madness. This book, known as the Red Book, wasn't published until nearly half a century after his death, and within its lavishly illustrated pages lies the very DNA of his most revolutionary ideas. But within this secret world of archetypes and shadows, Jung met a figure so profound, so challenging, it would redefine his understanding of God and the human spirit. In the secret pages of this book, Carl Jung met a prophet. This wasn't some comforting guide. This ancient voice, who called himself Elijah, presented Jung with a terrifying paradox that would challenge the very nature of the divine and force him to confront the darkness he had awakened in his own soul. This is the story of that encounter, and the prophet Jung kept hidden in his Red Book. Part 1. The Descent. To understand why a man of science like Carl Jung would willingly take a dive into what he called the land of the dead, we have to go back to 1913. This was a time of huge personal and professional crisis for Jung. His friendship and collaboration with Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, had completely shattered. The split wasn't just a professional disagreement. It was a profound schism that left Jung in a state of what he called disorientation, feeling totally suspended in midair. He'd lost his mentor, his intellectual community, and the very framework that had structured his understanding of the psyche. Freud had insisted that the unconscious mind was basically a cellar of repressed sexual desires and traumatic memories, but Jung felt this was a woefully incomplete picture. He sensed something more. Something ancient and universal stirring beneath the personal muck of individual lives. This wasn't just theoretical, it was deeply personal. For Jung, reducing the vast, mysterious ocean of the unconscious to a single drive was to strip humanity of its soul, its myths, and its spiritual dimension. After the break, Jung found himself plagued by horrifying visions. He saw Europe drenched in a sea of blood, a monstrous flood wiping out civilization. This was in October of 1913. By August of the next year, the First World War had begun, and Jung realized with chilling clarity that his inner world was somehow reflecting the coming cataclysm of the outer world. He knew then that he had a duty not just to himself, but to his time. He had to understand the forces erupting in his own mind, because they were the same forces erupting across the continent. This was Jung's confrontation with the unconscious. He made the terrifyingly brave decision not to pathologize or suppress these experiences, but to dive into them head first. He began a process he later called active imagination, a method of consciously entering his waking fantasies as if they were real, speaking to the figures he met and recording their dialogues. He documented this raw, unfiltered journey in a series of black notebooks, which would later be transcribed and beautifully illustrated in the massive red leather folio that became the Red Book. He described this time as feeling helpless before an alien world. Everything in it seemed difficult and incomprehensible. He had lost faith in the science of the day, realizing all his knowledge was useless in this new landscape. His soul, he wrote, had led him into a desert, the desert of his own self, which he'd long neglected for the outer world and the spirit of the times. For 25 nights he wandered this inner desert, learning to speak to his soul as if it were a separate, living being. It was in this desolate, terrifying, yet fertile wilderness that he prepared himself for the most pivotal encounters of his life. He was stripping away the certainties of his ego to make room for something far older, far wiser, and far more dangerous. He was preparing to meet his gods and his demons. Part 2. The Encounter. The vision begins, as so many of Jung's inner journeys did, in a desolate, dreamlike landscape. Jung finds himself walking in a barren desert, the very symbol of his own neglected inner world. Before him stands a house with stately columns, and as he approaches, an old man emerges. He's ancient, his presence radiating an authority that transcends time. He looks, Jung says, like one of the old prophets of the Bible. At his feet lies a great black serpent. Suddenly, a beautiful maiden steps out from the house. She walks with an unnerving uncertainty, and Jung realizes with a shock that she is blind. The old man turns to Jung, his voice like stone and dust, and says, "I am Elijah, and this is my daughter, Salome." The names hit Jung with the force of a physical blow. Elijah, the great prophet of the Old Testament, a man who spoke with God, a symbol of the highest spiritual authority and wisdom. And Salome, the infamous dancer from the Gospels, the seductive girl whose whim led to the beheading of John the Baptist. She is a figure of amoral, bloody desire, a tiger, as Jung calls her hands stained with the blood of the Holy One. And this man, this icon of spirit and thought, claims she's his daughter. The contradiction is horrifying, impossible. Jung reels from the paradox. "What my eyes see is exactly what I cannot grasp," he tells them. "You, Elijah, who are a prophet, the mouth of God, and she, a bloodthirsty horror. You are the symbol of the most extreme contradiction." Elijah's reply is simple, and it shatters Jung's attempt to file them away as mere symbols. "We are real," the prophet insists, "and not symbols." Then, the blind Salome turns her sightless eyes toward Jung and speaks. Her voice isn't that of a monster, but of a lover. "I am Salome," she says. "I am the daughter of the prophet. My father knows the deepest mysteries. He sees the things of the future. And what wouldn't you give for a single look into the infinite unfolding of what is to come? Are these not worth a sin for you?" She closes the distance between them and asks the question that cuts to the heart of Jung's conflict. "Do you love me?" Jung is repulsed. "How can I love you?" he cries out. "How do you come to this question? I see only one thing. You are Salome, a tiger. How should I love you?" Her response isn't an argument, but a prophecy of its own. "You will love me." And Elijah, the wise father, confirms this terrifying union. "I and my daughter have been one since eternity," he states. "My wisdom and my daughter are one." The scene shifts. Elijah leads Jung away from the desert floor up to a high mountain summit. There stands a mighty boulder, a natural altar. "This is the temple of the sun," Elijah proclaims. "This place is a vessel that collects the light of the sun. Prepare yourself in its light." As Jung stands before this altar, he is overcome. He spreads his arms wide, assuming the posture of crucifixion. At that moment, the great black serpent that lay at Elijah's feet coils itself around Jung's body. It winds around his feet, his torso, his arms, squeezing the very blood from him. His face, in the vision, contorts and transforms into the countenance of a lion. He's held fast, a living sacrifice entwined by this primal, earthly force. Salome, the blind one, draws near. She kneels, bends down to his feet, and wraps her long black hair around them. She stays there for a long time in an act of devotion that seems utterly at odds with her blood-soaked history. Then, a cry of astonishment. "I see light," she exclaims. Her eyes are open. She can see. At the moment of her sight, the serpent uncoils and falls from Jung's body, lying languid on the ground. Jung, released from the crucifixion, kneels at the feet of Elijah, whose form now shines like a flame. The prophet speaks one final time, his voice resonating with the finality of a divine decree. "Your work is fulfilled here. Other things will come. Seek untiringly, and above all, write exactly what you see." It's a command and a validation. The terrifying encounter wasn't a chaotic slide into madness, but a necessary, structured, and meaningful initiation. Jung, the scientist, the doctor, was being ordained as a scribe of the soul. He was to bear witness, not just to analyze. Part 3. The Revelation. So what on earth are we to make of this bizarre and powerful drama? A holy prophet, his murderous daughter, a black serpent, and a crucifixion on a mountaintop. To understand this, we have to speak the language of the unconscious, which is the language of symbolism. Though Elijah insisted he and Salome were real, they were real in the way that archetypes are real. Powerful, autonomous psychic forces living within all of us. This encounter is perhaps the single most crucial scene in the entire Red Book for understanding Jung's mature psychology. It's a living map of the psyche, a dramatization of its most fundamental conflict. Elijah is the personification of what Jung would later call logos. He represents forethinking, intellect, reason, law, and the spiritual principle. He's the archetypal father, the voice of wisdom and divine order. He is the part of the mind that seeks to understand, to classify, to create structure, and to ascend toward the abstract and the holy. He is the spirit. Salome, on the other hand, is the personification of Eros. She represents feeling, pleasure, passion, and connection. She is the anima, the feminine aspect of the male psyche, but in a raw, untamed form. She's blind because the feeling function, in its pure state, doesn't see with the discerning eye of logic. It simply experiences. It moves toward what it desires, what it loves, what it feels connected to, without moral judgment. Salome's history is bloody because Eros, without the balance of logos, can be destructive. It's pure, unmediated instinct. She is the soul. And the black serpent? The serpent is the third principle, a stranger to both logos and Eros, yet connected to them. It represents the primal, chthonic, earthly force of the unconscious itself. It's the raw, instinctual energy of life that writhes between the two poles. It's our connection to the nourishing Earth Mother, the deep, non-human part of our being. This is the force that can bind us, as it bound Jung, but also the force that contains the raw power of transformation. It represents the function of sensation, the grounding in physical reality. So, the shocking revelation that Salome is Elijah's daughter is the central teaching of the vision. Logos and Eros, thinking and feeling, spirit and soul, aren't enemies. They are parent and child. They're eternally bound. As Elijah says, "My wisdom and my daughter are one." The thinking principle, to be whole, must acknowledge that it gives birth to the feeling principle, and the feeling principle is born from wisdom. This was a direct and devastating challenge to the Western intellectual tradition, which has for centuries tried to elevate logos by denigrating and suppressing Eros. We're taught to privilege reason over emotion, spirit over the body, and holy thought over base pleasure. But here, in Jung's own soul, the prophet of holy thought declares that the principle of pleasure is his own child. Jung's initial reaction is the typical one, revulsion. He wants the purity of Elijah without the bloody hands of Salome. But the vision forces him to confront the truth. You can't have one without the other. They are an inseparable, paradoxical pair. As Jung would later write, reflecting on this vision, those who think base the world on thought, those who feel on feeling. You find truth and error in both. He realized that the thinker fears his own depths because they lead to the garden of Salome, the world of pleasure and feeling. To be a holy man, to be purely a thinker, is to lose your head to her. The crucifixion scene is the climax of this integration. Jung, the modern man of science, must become a sacrifice. He's bound by the serpent, the primal energy of the unconscious, and in this state of surrender, he is forced to unite the opposites within himself. It is this act of holding the tension, of being stretched between spirit and earth, that performs the miracle. Salome, the blind feeling function, receives her sight. Eros, when acknowledged and held in tension with logos, is no longer blind and destructive. It becomes sighted. It learns to see. Feeling becomes conscious, and only then is the work fulfilled. Part 4. The Integration. The encounter with Elijah and Salome wasn't just a strange dream. It was the crucible in which Jung's most important concept was forged. Individuation. Individuation is the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, a separate, indivisible whole. It's the journey of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of yourself to achieve wholeness. This vision was Jung's own individuation process in action. Before this, Jung, like the culture he lived in, was one-sided. He was a man of logos, a thinker, a scientist. He sought to analyze and understand, but his soul, as he admitted, had become a desert. The spirit of the depths forced him to confront the parts of himself he had repressed, the feeling, the passion, the pleasure, the primal instinct, Salome and the serpent. The vision taught him the most crucial lesson of his life. Wholeness isn't achieved by choosing good over evil, or spirit over nature, or thinking over feeling. Wholeness isn't about perfection, it's about completeness. And completeness requires embracing the tension of the opposites within yourself. The prophet Elijah, the voice of Logos, could not be whole without his daughter Salome, the embodiment of Eros. But as Jung wrote, the prophet had profaned himself by not loving her, and Salome, by not loving God, the ultimate principle of Logos, had profaned herself. The healing for both, and for Jung, lay in their union. Jung had to learn to love Salome, to accept the bloodthirsty horror as a divine power within him. In doing so, he wasn't condoning her amoral history. He was integrating the raw power of the Eros principle, making it conscious, and in doing so, giving it sight. This is what the final scene on the mountaintop represents. By willingly undergoing the crucifixion, the painful state of being stretched between the opposites of spirit, the mountaintop, and earth, the serpent, Jung creates a new synthesis. His face becomes that of a lion, a symbol of integrated vital power. Salome gains her sight. The psychic split is healed. This is the great work of alchemy that Jung saw mirrored in psychology, turning base matter, raw, unconscious instincts, into gold, conscious wholeness. So, what does this mean for you? This isn't just a story about a Swiss psychiatrist's bizarre visions over a century ago. It's a roadmap for a core human struggle, one that's perhaps more relevant today than ever. We live in a world that glorifies logos. We're taught to be productive, rational, and efficient. We build our lives on logic and forethought. And in the process, many of us find our souls have become deserts. We feel a deep sense of spiritual alienation, a feeling that something essential is missing. Jung's encounter with his hidden prophet tells us what's missing. It's Salome. It's the Eros principle, the capacity for play, for passion, for non-productive pleasure, for deep, non-rational connection to others and to life itself. We've been taught to fear her, to see her as a dangerous distraction from the serious business of life. A thinker, Jung wrote, should fear Salome since she wants his head. And she does. She wants the head of the tyrannical, one-sided intellect to fall so that the heart can have its say. The path to regaining your soul, as Jung's journey shows, isn't to abandon reason and descend into chaos. It is to do something far more difficult, to hold the tension. It's to acknowledge that the prophet of your highest ideals and the blind dancer of your deepest desires are father and daughter. They belong together. You have to find a way to honor the wisdom of Elijah and love Salome. You have to find a way for your forethinking to coexist with your pleasure, your spirit with your soul. This is the middle way, the path that writhes, as Jung said, like the serpent from right to left and from left to right, from thinking to pleasure and from pleasure to thinking. Conclusion. In the end, the prophet Jung kept hidden in his red book wasn't just Elijah. It was the complete paradoxical trinity of Elijah, Salome, and the serpent. The true revelation wasn't a simple word of wisdom, but a living image of wholeness. It revealed that the divine isn't found by ascending to some sterile purity, but by integrating the most profound contradictions of our own nature. The path to God, or to the self, isn't a straight line up, but a spiral that embraces both the mountaintop and the serpent's coil, both the prophet's wisdom and the dancer's passion. It teaches us that our greatest truth is found not in choosing between the light and the dark, but in learning to become a vessel strong enough to contain both. This is a deep and challenging idea, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. What does this paradox of Elijah and Salome mean to you? How do you see the conflict between Logos and Eros playing out in your own life or in the world around you? Share your interpretations in the comments below.